Welcome, everybody, back to RevCon. After a really exciting day one, we are back for day two. How many folks here were here yesterday and are excited for today? Put in the comments, number one, if you came yesterday. Also, feel free to drop your LinkedIn link in the comments. While we have some tremendous a day planned for you today, we want this to continue after today, and we are a community. So meet other people, network, and learn together. So that's exciting. I'm gonna break it down what we have planned for today before we jump into the first session on how brands can best leverage creators and influencers. And also, quick housekeeping. If you really dig a session, screenshot it and share it on LinkedIn. Tell others how much you dig it. When we find it, we'll reshare it on Rev Genius's LinkedIn to make sure that you get even more exposure. All right, so check this out. This is what our day looks like today. And before we jump in, we wouldn't be here today without the tremendous sponsors of RevCon and supporters of Rev Genius. These brands have leaned in to support our mission, but also what's next. So shout out to our diamond sponsor, Attention. You'll see Anise speaking later today. Platinum sponsors, Pigment, Seamless.ai, Zoom Info, Fullcast, Docket, Lean Data, and Alicia. All of them will have speakers throughout RevCon. Our gold sponsor, Una, is tremendous as well. And you wouldn't be able to see me, period, without the platform we're on, which is AirMeet. So thank you all for supporting what's next and go to market. So quick rundown of the day two lineup, everybody. I'm about to hop in with these three tremendous women for how brands can best leverage creators and influencers in B2B. And most of you probably are here for that. This is our kickoff session. These are three of the best. And I have some questions to ask them, and I think you'll really dig it. Then one of the most handsome founders in SaaS, Aaron McReynolds, will be speaking on sales productivity and the last human hack for GTM. Followed by, I'm interviewing Varun, the founder of Clay, the company that's on Forbes' next unicorn list. I think they're listed number one on there. A company I've followed and known closely for some time, being a fellow New York company. We're going to jump in and unpack their growth. Then Luke and Arjun with how Zoom Info boosts sales win rates with Docket AI. Docket, one of our sponsors, tremendous tool that we're so excited about. Peep, who's the reason I told a story yesterday indirectly by suggesting a book that I read, is going to talk about standing out in SaaS with messaging. And he's one of the best with Winter. Anise, as I foreshadowed, is going to tell us exactly how they're 10xing revenue and growth with some AI hacks. He is a growth aficionado and a phenomenal CEO and a former competitor of mine in my past life. And then we're closing today with Cynthia Barnes with what's next in sales. All right, that's enough for that. We're so amped. We have just about 150 people in here. Everybody's warmed up. I'm going to bring women, a phenomenal panel on the stage now for how brands can best leverage creators and influencers. Let's go. Welcome to RevCon. What is up, guys?
Hello.
I was pretty sure I took like 20 minutes there, but it was a last 4. So this, I'm going to introduce you all to this panel that I'm so excited to learn from. So the power panel of Sarah Adams as head of partnerships and influencer marketing at Wix, Sarah drives global influencer strategies that fuel growth and engagement for Wix's B2B solutions. Welcome, Sarah.
Great to be here.
We also have Brianna Doe, host of Stop the Scroll, which is phenomenal influencer marketing podcast, and founder of Verbatim, a phenomenal agency that specializes in influencer marketing. Brianna knows how to match B2B brands with the right talent. Katie Penner, you've seen her around. Maybe you've even received a gift from her. At Sendoso, Katie is the mastermind behind innovative influencer programs that sync perfectly with larger marketing goals, ensuring that every move counts. And we have these three women here to help you understand more about influencer marketing. This wasn't around 2 years ago, was it, in B2B? Sarah,
well,
sort of.
I think it's always been around, just in different forms, you know?
Okay.
So maybe not so much on like LinkedIn, although I bet it was still. I always say wherever there's content, there's paid content, you know?
Yes.
So I bet it was around 2 years ago. For me, for LinkedIn, not as much, but I bet it was.
Yeah, and I came from the B2C world. So it's been around my whole career. And then when I jumped back into B2B, I was like, yeah, where is it? But, just kicking us off, like, why should companies do influencer marketing, Brianna?
Perfect. Put me in the hot seat. So there are a few reasons. First and foremost, we're in such a content saturated world. I mean, if you got on Instagram right now or even LinkedIn right now and just started scrolling, you'd probably just see ad, piece of content, ad, piece of content. To a great extent, I think our brains have started to kind of just immediately dismiss any ads that we see to a large extent. And with influencer marketing, like when you partner with the right creators that are thought leaders or subject matter experts in the space, you are cutting through that noise. Like you're able to build trust and build credibility with your decision makers and directly with your audience instead of having to just rely on paid ads or just rely on organic content. It's such a great way to connect like more personally with your audience.
Katie, building on that, how do you view influencer marketing at Sendoso?
Yeah, so for us, right, I think influencer marketing was a great way and is a great way to kind of boost our brand. That is what we looked at, doing with this influencer program, was kind of reinvigorating what we had created. And, I think ultimately it helped us to build trust at scale because we were really intentional with who we chose to represent our brand. And I think we ultimately were able to do that successfully with our first round of influencers. So it's pretty cool.
And Sarah, with Wix, when did you all start doing influencer marketing, and what was like the core reason behind it?
So I'll actually never forget the moment because it was like roughly, I'd say 3 years ago. And I'm talking just about our B2B solutions. And I remember that my boss, the VP marketing, kind of stopped me on the hallway, and he had his Twitter feed open, and he was going through, and he follows obviously, influencers within the very specific niche that we were targeting at that time, because I mean, for the obvious reason, it's a terrific way to tap in to the community and just to understand what the hot topics are. What are people talking about? What are their challenges? And he said to me, he's like, Sarah, we need to be here. And he was just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So that was the very moment that we understood that we need to do something. And at that moment, I'll be honest, I've never been a Twitter person. I didn't even have a Twitter account. I was like, shit, I've got some learning to do. But that was like quite a turning point. So that was when we began. And I think similar to anyone starting something new that you've never done before, there was like a crazy learning curve, that took place of just understanding, what is an influencer? How do brands work with influencers? What are the opportunities out there? How much do they cost? So that was a really interesting starting point.
And that's a great segue, because in my head, I'm like, okay, Twitter, boss, do this. What'd you do? Did you Google somebody with the top Twitter followers? Did you?
So yeah,
who
so I
hit your feed?
actually,
Like, step one, how'd you find these people?
so I didn't know. I wasn't sure which. I mean, fine, Twitter was only one channel of many channels, and I didn't know which to focus on. I mean, yes, my boss is on Twitter, so okay, so to show results, I should be on Twitter, but I wasn't sure about the other channels. So I didn't really know where to start. So I actually started on just a Google search of like, top. What I was searching for, that specific niche was web developers. So I literally wrote, top web developers to follow in 2024. I mean, back then it was 2023, but it was like towards the end.
Mhm.
And I was, and I would literally see like what, just going through the results, looking for names that appear more than once, and just starting to slowly create a list and then learning which channels are they on, and therefore which channels I should be focusing on. And then once I started to accumulate this list together of ones that I feel confident are something that, are worth my time or worth me looking into, I would then look to see who are they following, and who's following them, because that's proven to be, at least for me, a really good way to find relevant influencers to work with. But at first I wasn't sure. Like the very initial benchmark in terms of following at that very initial search was 20K. Today I know that that's like bullshit because what really matters are their level of engagement, how many views they get. It doesn't actually matter. I mean, it does matter, but it doesn't matter. So I think if I kind of went back to myself 3 or so years ago, I'd say, don't look at following, look at engagement, look at other metrics.
I love that. I was going to foreshadow to that question. Did you end up on Twitter with looking for influencers? Was that the right spot, or where did this?
So my research did show back in the day that yes, Twitter, at least for web developers, is one of their main tools, like social media outlets. So yes, it was, and YouTube also super, super important. And that was what we focused on. But since then, we've learned that Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn is also incredibly relevant for that audience.
Reddit, maybe?
Yeah, Reddit as well. But Reddit is a different ballgame.
Reddit is wild, and I don't know how to get a Reddit influencer, nor do I. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because I think Reddit is literally a rabbit hole.
A Reddit hole.
There's some chains that aren't appropriate to mention on video that are hysterical on Reddit. But Brianna, how do you advise your clients to get started, with influencer marketing? Or how do you help?
Well, I think the first step is to get really clear and align on your goals. I think that's a piece that can be easily overlooked. And that's not just alignment with your, direct team and department, but also with the executive team, if necessary, the leadership team. So getting really clear on the goals for the campaign, whether it's the first campaign, the third campaign, it really doesn't matter. And making sure you have that internal buy-in. Because at that point, then you're in a position to start actually sourcing and identifying influencers and content creators that could be a good fit for your brand. What's really important too is once you actually start engaging with them, to be able to communicate those goals, right? And make sure that there's alignment with them as well. The whole point of this is for it to be successful for both parties. So that clarity and transparency always has to be the first step.
With goal setting, what do clients typically come to you saying their goals are, and what do you correct them with where they should be? Am I thinking about this right? I see you smiling.
Yeah, I typically get one of two answers. I either get, we want to drive sales, just direct conversions, or we want to just make noise and drive awareness. And neither answer or goal is, inherently wrong. It really depends on budget, stage of the company, how it integrates with any existing marketing strategies or tactics. And what I would typically recommend is taking a step back and asking why. Okay, so you just want to drive awareness. How does that direct back or drive back to the overarching business goals or your bottom line? Are you at a stage where you can be focused on just brand sentiment right now and brand awareness? Or should we basically build in a level of this where you are capturing at least, leads or book demos or something like that? So thinking about influencer marketing more holistically and being open to looking at different goals and different objectives, and then aligning the content that's created and the influencers that you work with around those goals.
So let's say somebody comes to you, they're like a Series A company, a little bit of traction, and they're like, listen, I got 10 grand. I want to throw it in. Like, how would you guide them? Because that's not like a massive budget. In their heads, it's a marketing spend, right? Like, and it could get somewhere. How would you guide somebody to spend their first $10,000, let's say, like with a company that has moderate success?
Well, for context, similar to you, I started in the B2C space and then
Yeah,
transitioned into B2B. And I always worked with very lean budgets, whether it was for paid, for influence marketing, whatever the case may be. Very rarely did I have a lot of money to spend per month or per campaign. And
fair.
so I completely understand the need to work within lean budgets, even if it feels like a lot of money, to the company. And you can drive growth with that 10 grand. Like if you allocate that effectively, you can. I'm going to pull the classic marketer answer and say, I don't know if I have a full answer for that because there were so
Fair.
many questions I would ask. What is your product? What have you done so far in terms of marketing? Who does your audience trust? Like who do they engage with and on what channels? So figuring out what channels we're going to tackle first
Yeah.
will then help me actually allocate that spend. So really, I mean, the short answer is it depends, but making sure you understand who you want to target, who they connect with, who they trust, whose content they resonate with, what channels or platforms you want to leverage for influencer marketing. Those are the first key questions to answer. And then from there, we'll dive into, okay, this is how I recommend allocating the spend. This is the estimated ROI that I see or the impact that I see with this campaign.
I love that. And that's spot on. Now, passing it to Katie, when you were setting up this influencer program, like how'd you figure out who was right for it?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think it was pretty unique, like how this came to be for Sendoso, right? I kind of had immersed myself in this like LinkedIn creator culture as an individual, and I was meeting all these creators, and I realized that there's some serious like talent and creativity that just blew me away with all of these new influencer friends of mine, that I had met at SaaStr and different events last year. And so I started to think about that, and I was like, wow, we could really use that creativity and that brilliance, and how can we incorporate that into our strategy? So I started thinking about influencer marketing, but I had no idea what I was doing. And so I made a ton of mistakes along the way. We did it in a very scrappy manner in which I was just kind of making things up as I went along. I wish that I had called Brianna and been like, hey, help me come, make this program. So learn from my mistake, hit her up if you're thinking about doing this. But when it comes to how we selected the influencers, right? I think that the most important thing is to make sure that they align with your brand, right? I think brand is something that should be protected fiercely. And, so I would get to know these influencers, make sure that they align. Also, we looked at things like, of course, follower count. You've heard it mentioned by Sarah and Brianna. Sarah mentioned this earlier that like, it's really easy to get caught up on someone's follower count at first. And like, oh, this person has 200,000 followers. That's insane. But really what matters is the engagement rate. And also what audience is watching their posts, right? So Brianna taught me something on a different panel where you should be asking to see, their analytics, what people are actually engaging with them. And that's so important. So I've learned a lot throughout these panels and, through the trial and error of building a very scrappy program. But I would say that, the best thing is to find someone whose values align with your brand.
What I
Katie, if
love,
you ever want to chat about this, my consulting fee for you is 50 cents and like a coffee chat. So
Let's
yeah.
go. Round 2 of Influencer. I am coming straight to you. We're doing
Perfect.
I will work for less money and have less good input as well.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have like a whole panel of people to just help me with influencer marketing. I'm obsessed.
You have to Venmo me 13 cents.
I will do that.
Somehow that's probably harder than mailing a dollar. But what I love about how Katie has set up her program is the community she's built around. Like you heard her like referencing being a part of the creator community, going to this event, right? Like going to that. I think this is a strategic advantage if you're in house, right? Like to build a culture and community, because like there's other ways to give outside of dollar amounts,
Yeah.
in addition to dollar amounts, and you could build longer term partnerships easier. And it's one of the few advantages, distinct advantages versus an agency building it in house. There's tons because Brianna sees dozens of programs, right? To bring it in. But like if you're building it in house, like listen to Katie and Sarah for sure, because you could build community from that. And I think that's would you agree that you've seen that, Sarah and Katie, like in what you're building?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have a Slack channel with all of the influencers so they were able to collaborate, but also what we provided to our influencers went beyond dollar amounts, right? So we were providing them a free Sendoso account with money loaded in so they could gift to their clients, their prospects, etc., and share these authentic experiences. So they were able to get a free platform with gifting budget, which was really valuable to them. We also strived to put them on stages. So we do a lot of events. The Real Retreat, right? We had some influencers there that we put on panels. We always were trying to elevate their voices and them as human beings. And I think that that's how we were able to really like keep people bought in, keep people engaged, and to really form those deeper relationships. So, Sarah, what about you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add on what you said about inviting them to events and these kind of activities. I think it's important when you're looking at influencer marketing, and I think this is particularly relevant for B2B, is that it's not, don't look at it as something that's transactional only. That I'm buying content, they've uploaded the content, it's over. That should just be the very beginning. And what's important is to look at it as a long-term play, and to look at how important, to invest in developing those relationships, right? So obviously at first, like you're not sure yet, it's the first time you're working with an influencer, you don't yet know if it's a match. But once it only takes, at least for us, it just takes a few pieces of content that we're working with them on to understand if this is someone that has kind of that long-term value or not. And the ones that do, it's important to to maintain those relationships, to nurture them, to develop them, to create communities, but also, just like Katie said, to see how else we can leverage these relationships. So if it's inviting them to speak at events or creating, I don't know, an ebook with them, or just doing more and more things to leverage that, and to not just see it, like I said, as just paid content.
I love where this is going. To build on this, I've always said money for posts and stuff, that's an obvious value point for who you're working with. And I'm going to take this KPI question a couple of ways, leading off of this, like building an ecosystem for other bullets that are real value for the people that you work with. And I say real versus perceived, like, hey, you want to be seen everywhere. Did they say that, or did you say that? If they said that, then yeah, like let's let them be seen everywhere. We're at a very like interesting time in B2B where people do want to be seen. In 5 years from now, they're going to be numb AF, right? Like in 5 months they might be, but like right now, like whether it's HubSpot having like the creator like area, that was cool. I'm talking to my partner who runs Cosmopolitan magazine, and they have Club Cosmo that's gonna like roll out, like where they have, I don't know if I can announce this, but like yeah, so like awards like where top folks are being seen. And if you have the distribution and the audience, that them being seen is like going to net them out more money overall, then you could argue that that's a good money move too. And not just the other thing. So from a KPI standpoint, I'm curious to hear how Sarah organizes her KPIs, but also, you know, measuring success with the influencer program internally, but also how you measure success with using the influencers you work with's metrics and how they're looking at it.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, the way we measure success, I'm sure, is very different, you know, to other brands. And like Brianna said earlier, you know, you have to be very clear on your goals from the get-go, and therefore how you're going to be measuring those goals. For us, since day one, and we don't plan changing this at all, it's a brand awareness play. So the way we measure success is we measure each asset. So each video, each post that we sponsor, we're looking at KPIs of number of views, of engagement rate, you know, how many likes, how many shares, you know, the comment sentiment. You know, we're very much focused on the asset itself. And we want to see over time, obviously, you know, improvement on all those KPIs month over month. So that's how we know. It's like we need to be looking at the very bigger picture, you know, so we take the metrics from each asset, but in the end, when we decide, okay, is this successful? Is this going in the right direction? It's by looking at the very bigger picture on a monthly basis. So we don't actually, I mean, yes, sometimes we'll look at it on a campaign basis, but it's really the monthly growth that we're looking at.
Nice. And the value from the influencers you work with, what value are they receiving from Wix outside of monetary?
Well, I think I mean, if it's a good question. I mean, obviously we pay every single influencer, so it does start there. But I think the most value comes with influencers that are also in it for the long run, that they, you know, that they understand that, you know, the first reach out from a brand, that they see it as a potential for something much longer, right? So I think it goes without saying that for the very first deal, it's never going to be 6 months or an annual deal. Like, you know, we've never worked together. Like, there is trust that needs to be built throughout that first deal. And it really is critical. Now, when we're working with an influencer on a first deal, I won't necessarily say, I mean, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but I don't always say, hey, if things go well, like we could be looking at a much longer deal the second time round. But I think the influencers that are more professional, more used to working with brands, they have that mindset where they do want to invest, and they should, in the first agreement, always looking at that potential for the long term. And I think that's where the real value is.
You know, just to go into the first agreement, what does that look like from a commitment standpoint? And what does that look like roughly from a pay standpoint? Like, how much should people be paying? Is it 10,000? Is it 100?
So it ranges crazy. And there's a few, I often try to share like some idea of costs on my LinkedIn posts, and you can see, I mean, if people want to dig in, because it depends on so many variables, right? I mean, there's the influencer themselves, and yes, their following and their engagement rate, and what do their value as an influencer. And then it depends, of course, on the platform that they're on. Price of a long form YouTube video could be, I don't know, anywhere between, say, at least these are the prices we're seeing, anywhere between, say, 2K to 20K a video, right? And then Instagram Reel could be anywhere between, I don't know, $500 to $3,000. But it just depends on so many things, because like we focus mostly on nano and micro influencers, right? So the larger influencers we work with, they're not the Mr. Beasts of the world. They'll have maybe 200K followers, 500K followers, right? So it really, like, I know it's not, we don't like saying it depends, but it does. It does depend. But we, like, our first deals are usually, it's to test the waters. It will usually be, say, 3, 4, 5 deliverables, right? So it could be sponsored, it could be posts or videos according to the different platform. Although again, when it's YouTube and it's long form, so one video is enough. But it's important to understand, like, we really try to avoid deals of just one asset, because it just doesn't make sense, because the influencer needs to invest, especially for B2B, especially for SaaS. Like, they need to invest time, a lot of time, in like learning the platform, right? Because if they're going to create content about our B2B solutions, they need to be like expert level, right? They need to really learn the platform. And these are, I mean, so many influencers that we work with have never touched our platform before we reached out to them. Or maybe they've heard of it, maybe they touched a bit, but they need to invest time. So to just do one video would it would be unfair, to be honest. I don't think it's professional.
I think I want to slow down what you just said. Everybody needs to hear that.
Okay.
It's more than one post, especially in B2B. They need to understand your platform, and to measure success on one post. And I may or may not be speaking from experience, where you don't even have access to that platform. How organic, interesting, and authentic is that actually going to be?
What do you mean by they don't have access?
Oh, some people will do one post and they won't be given access to the platform that they're supposed to be posted on about.
Which I believe isn't even the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, has pretty stringent rules around that. They do need to at least have tried the product at least once.
My God.
So just a heads up, if you are a brand that is not giving full access to the product to the influencers that you're working with.
So no, that sounds mad.
Issue.
That sounds
mad.
So
people who are watching this, as a starting point, and Brianna, like, do you want to unpack like where you like the starting point and range as well, just so that we can get some like consensus? Because I think there's some commonalities here that people can learn from.
You mean ranges in terms of
dollar amounts, and like also like amounts of posting or time the partnership would run, like what the deliverables are and pricing.
Yeah, so similar to what Sarah said, pricing can really range. I've seen, granted, some people I don't think charge enough for the expertise and thought leadership that they produce and share, but I've seen ranges from $300 to $2,000 for the same follower count and similar engagement rates. So instead of sharing ranges, what I think is really important to know, if you are starting off in influencer marketing, you're not sure what to expect in terms of ranges, it is completely okay to reach out to influencers and start getting ideas of what they charge. And you can start to pull together trends. Okay, so these 5 influencers with similar followings and similar engagement rates, I'm seeing a range from 500 to 1,500. Like, how do I work within this? Or same for larger followings. So it's okay to just start having conversations, gathering media kits, gathering analytics, and then, aligning your budget or allocating spend accordingly once you have a better idea of what you're working with, because the ranges vary, especially in B2B. if I were to Google right now, how much does a fitness influencer charge on Instagram? There's so much more information for B2C. With
Mhm.
B2B, there isn't that much standardization and there aren't that many resources. So just have the conversations with the creators, be prepared for some large ranges, and most of them will expect negotiation of some sort. It should just be a conversation. In terms of deliverables, as a marketer, as a content creator, and now as an agency owner, I see all sides of it, and I understand that sponsor posts are low lift and a really accessible way to start testing influencer marketing. I don't see anything wrong with sponsored posts. I think sponsored content it can be really impactful. It's a great way to just get your name and your brand in front of an audience. But the cool thing about B2B is, I mean, influence marketing is so new in this space, probably no more than 5, 6 years old. So you can get as creative as you want. I mean, I'm seeing companies, like I think Katie mentioned this, having them like sending influencers to speaking engagements, getting them in front of Sendoso's audience, partnering with them on co-created content. Like really think outside the box and think about how your marketing strategy as a whole can inform the influencer strategy instead of just putting content creators in this one box of sponsored posts. Caveat being, your budget has to allow for it. And it's okay if your program has to scale. You do not have to do everything at once. You do not have to agree to 6-month partnerships at once. Like it's just like any other channel. You need to test it, you need to experiment with it and see what works for your company before you start committing to longer term collaborations.
Awesome answer. I'm going to go straight to the QA because there's some killer questions that came in, and I'm going to just send them to one of you each. We have about 10 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, put them in the QA. Even if we can't get through them all in the next 9 minutes, we will answer them following. All right. Katie, how can you assess the quality of their followers, influencer or potential influencers followers against your ICP without having access to their data?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sarah nailed it in the answer here in the thread. Like, I would start looking at keywords and making sure that they align to the relevant topics that, you want them talking about. You can also take a look at, who is engaging with their posts and, look at their titles, see if these are within your ICP, right? I mean, I think that it takes some, kind of digging if you don't have access to their data yet. But if you ask to meet with these creators, they should be pretty open about telling you that information, right? Especially if they are interested in working with you. So typically it's not a problem to gain access to that data if you're interested as well.
Or use Clay to scrape everything about them. Just kidding.
You also could do that, honestly.
Just kidding. But not really. So I think Brianna would be good for this question because it's more of a startup, and I know you have a broad range as these two other women are working with some well-established companies, as are you. How do you recommend a startup compete with bigger brands for influencer attention? We don't have the budget or the distribution to use that as a selling point for influencers. How can startups form a strong what's in it for you argument?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts for this one. I am curious what they mean by we don't have the budget. While I do think there are a lot of ways to
zero. Like, let's assume
right.
a low
Like if you
budget
have
here.
a smaller, but what were you saying?
Let's assume a small budget.
So you can work with a smaller budget. I mean, this might be a spicy take. The thing you have to consider with a smaller budget is you have to be willing to adjust your influencer strategy. You might not be able to work with the larger influencers that you want to work with. Like if you just don't have the selling point to partner with them yet, that's fine. And to my earlier point, your program can scale as you prove it out, as you test it out. So if it comes to not having a large budget compared to a well-established company, that's completely fine. I think a lot of it just comes down to creativity. I've worked with marketers and spoke with marketers who have focused on finding ways to elevate their influencers that they work with as part of a selling point, who offer longer term partnerships, similar to what Sarah said. I think what's most important is just like you would treat your customers, don't assume that you know what they want. Just ask them. Like, what would be useful for you? What would provide value for you? As a creator, I'm actually talking to a brand now who asked that question. Like, outside of just payment and compensation, what can we do to provide value to you? Like, what do you need right now as a content creator? And so being willing to have those conversations and get creative with the, influencer campaigns, I think is crucial. In terms of what's in it for you outside of that, yeah, I think if you are working with a smaller budget, you just also need to be more willing to negotiate and work collaboratively with the creators as well. It all comes down to creativity.
Yeah, and building on that, you see tons of people who I'm fairly certain just get like flown out to like Dreamforce, and they're probably just crushing content at no cost. And there's a certain profile that would be hype on that. There's a certain profile that's not for them. So it's like aligning with the people that would be like that would actually be valuable for, right, Brianna? Like, and then running a community, like literally go to people and ask how you could help them before asking anything from them. In the beginning, that'll put them in your ecosystem and give them your product, and then it might actually come out organically. Like, hey, if you like that, can you tell somebody, or maybe do something solid? I could also do this. So creativity is key. I want to give this next one to Sarah. For a company with a specific niche in B2B, would you recommend targeting influencers who specialize in that topic or focusing on influencers with a broader reach? What's your experience?
So definitely I would my recommendation is to focus on the niche, and as much as possible, like to look at it as a kind of long tail strategy where you're working with as many as your budget can allow. And I would definitely go to nano and micro influencers. And not only that, I would also make sure that the influencers I'm working with are connected to each other, right? So they're all part of the same network. And I think particularly if you're limited by budget and you want to obviously make an impact, then I think focusing, not shooting in all directions. Like, you need to be very, very, very focused in terms of what platform you want to focus on, and then making sure that those influencers are connected to each other should, at least in our experience, have a really good effect within your very specific niche.
Awesome. And we're coming up to time. I would love to close with each of you all providing like the one most potent piece of advice regarding any aspect of influencer marketing that you stand by, that has built your practice. Katie?
Yeah, I think for me, it's to build relationships first with these influencers, get to know them personally. I think that is really what kind of made our program special, is that we had authentic relationships and then brought them into what we did as a company. And so that increased the buy-in. It was really awesome, and is. And I think another kind of thing is that I would have enlisted help from someone like Brianna. Honestly, I would have called Brianna sooner, because you don't have to go into this blind, right? I think that there's a lot of mistakes that could have been avoided by calling on someone like Brianna. So that's a definite kind of piece of advice I would give, no matter how scrappy you are.
That comment was sponsored by Verbatim. Thank you very much.
Little do y'all know, I'm actually, she paid me to be an influencer for Verbatim during this.
Well, it's an unpaid internship currently, but
it was sponsored by Verbatim through TAC by RevGenius. Sarah, your tip.
Okay, so my the thing, I don't know how to define it, the value that's most important for me, and I think is something really important to keep in mind, especially when you're just starting off, is the importance of creative freedom. Like, to understand that you're working with influencers because they're so great at what they do. They're content creators. This is what they do. And to let them lead. Like, don't tell them what to say. I mean, yes, provide a brief, be very, very clear with your goals and your KPIs and what's important to you and what message you want them to deliver, but give them the first stab at deciding what angle to take and how to do it. And then that leads to the feedback process, which again, I think is something that's more kind of valid or more, maybe has more weight in B2B, especially SaaS, than B2C. So in the feedback is to stay clear of style, right? You chose this influencer for a reason. So don't tell them to, I don't know, say to use certain words that aren't natural to them, or don't tell them that you don't like their background or you don't like the music they chose. Like, you need to trust them to do what they do best and give feedback. If they said the feature wrong, if they use the wrong feature, if, I don't know, their screen is in a way that you can't see your logo, and obviously that is important. So just to give critical feedback that you cannot, that you can't approve the video going live without it, and to steer away from style, from their uniqueness.
Great feedback. And Brianna, bring us home to the culmination of Verbatim's How Brands Can Leverage Creators segment.
Yeah, I'll go quickly. So stay open-minded when it comes to channels, content formats, the way that you engage with influencers. You might assume LinkedIn is the only place for B2B. It's not. I run quite a few campaigns on YouTube, on Instagram for B2B companies. In the past, even ran a lot of campaigns on Twitter for B2B. So stay open-minded on that. And first and foremost, focus on understanding where your audience lives on the internet, who they're engaging with, who they trust, what resonates with them. That research piece is crucial.
Thank you all for coming. This has been an incredible segment. I know not all the questions were answered. We will pass the panelists the questions that haven't been answered so that they could answer them and we could share with the group. The next session, get ready for Aaron McReynolds in sales.